What if I told you that the very country that once controlled the global economy is now teaching the world to live without it? For decades, the United States was seen as the safe bet, the place everyone wanted to trade with, invest in, and rely on. But today, something shocking is happening. Countries from Africa to Europe are quietly moving their money, their trade, and even their trust away from Washington. Why? Because America's unpredictability has become too dangerous. Tariffs appear overnight, allies are punished like enemies, and global markets are thrown into chaos. The real twist? This isn't just hurting rivals like China or Russia, it's isolating America itself. And the consequences could reshape the entire world order. Number one, the global shift away from the U.S. For much of the last century, the United States was the center of global trade. Companies and governments trusted it as the most stable partner, a place where deals would be honored and rules were predictable. But in recent years, that image has been shattered. Across the world, businesses and nations are learning a hard truth. Depending on the United States has become a dangerous gamble. One unexpected tariff or sanction can wipe out profits overnight, leaving entire industries scrambling for alternatives. What makes it worse is the uncertainty. A contract with Washington no longer guarantees stability. Policies can change at the whim of whoever sits in the White House. This has forced a global rethinking. Corporations that once relied heavily on American imports or exports are now rushing to diversify their supply chains. Countries are building new trade agreements outside of U.S. influence, turning instead to China, India, and other rising economies. The irony runs deep. Washington often warned the world not to trust Chinese technology companies, accusing them of spying and secrecy. Yet it was American tech giants whose products made it possible for the U.S. to listen in on world leaders' private conversations. The double standard hasn't gone unnoticed. Now, leaders and CEOs everywhere are drawing the same conclusion. The risks of staying tied too closely to America are simply too high. Whether it's a factory in Asia, a bank in Europe, or a government in Africa, all are making the same calculation. Buy somewhere else, sell somewhere else, and reduce dependence on Washington's unpredictable politics. What was once seen as the safest economic partner is quickly becoming the most volatile, and that shift is quietly redrawing the map of global power. Number two, rise of China and BRICS as alternatives. As the world drifts away from the U.S., another power bloc is stepping into the vacuum. China, along with its BRICS partners, Brazil, Russia, India, and South Africa, has emerged as the most serious alternative to Washington's dominance. Together, these nations now represent a larger share of the global economy than the United States and its closest allies. And they are not just growing in size, they are offering deals that many countries find impossible to ignore. Take Africa, for example. Nations seeking funds for railroads, ports, and infrastructure once traveled to Washington, London, or Paris, hoping for loans. Today, they follow up those meetings with trips to Beijing, New Delhi, and Sao Paulo. The logic is simple. Whoever offers the better deal wins. More often than not, China provides faster financing, fewer restrictions, and infrastructure completed on time. The result is a steady flow of countries turning toward the BRICS rather than the West. What makes this shift even more powerful is how visible it has become. Governments that accept Chinese investment may still send delegations to Washington to smooth relations, but the truth is clear. China and its partners are offering solutions that Western powers cannot match. At the same time, U.S. politics looks increasingly chaotic. One moment tariffs are imposed, the next they are delayed or removed. Agreements can be rewritten overnight, leaving allies uncertain and frustrated. For many nations, the contrast is striking. On one side, a rising bloc that offers predictable development, deals, and growing markets. On the other, a superpower that seems to weaponize its economy, punishing both friends and foes. This is why the BRICS are no longer just an alternative. They are becoming the preferred choice for much of the world, reshaping trade and power balances in ways the U.S. cannot easily reverse. Number three, America's self-isolation. After World War II, the United States designed its foreign policy with one goal in mind: containment. The strategy worked against the Soviet Union, which found itself cut off from much of the world economically and politically. But now, decades later, a strange reversal is taking place. By using tariffs, sanctions, and unpredictable trade policies, the U.S. is no longer isolating its rivals, it is isolating itself. Instead of being at the center of the global economy, Washington is slowly being pushed to the margins. Allies who once saw the U.S. as the anchor of stability are beginning to doubt its reliability. European leaders, for example, now question whether their deep alignment with Washington is a mistake. The war in Ukraine has already strained the transatlantic alliance, and at the same time, China and India are courting Europe with trade offers that seem far more practical. Even within the European Union, there is growing debate about whether betting everything on American leadership was the right decision. This sense of self-isolation is not just political, it is economic. Companies that once looked to the U.S. as the ultimate marketplace are shifting their focus toward Asia, Latin America, and Africa. Global supply chains are being restructured, and investments that would have gone into U.S. markets are flowing elsewhere. Washington may not admit it openly, but the pressure is visible. The irony is hard to miss. The U.S. once prided itself on being the world's indispensable partner. Now its actions are teaching nations how to move forward without it. Instead of building coalitions, tariffs and sanctions are driving countries to create new alliances that exclude Washington. Slowly but surely, America's greatest power, the ability to shape the global system, is slipping away, and much of it is the result of its own choices. Number 4. Tariffs and their global fallout. When tariffs were first introduced as a tool to protect American industries, they were framed as a way to bring jobs back home. But in reality, they became a blunt weapon that struck far beyond U.S. borders. Almost every country has felt the sting, from close allies in Europe to developing economies in Asia and Africa. What makes these tariffs so damaging is not just their size, it's their unpredictability. Businesses cannot plan for the future when they don't know if tomorrow will bring a new penalty, a suspended agreement, or another round of sanctions. For leaders abroad, this chaos has become a powerful political tool. Whenever domestic economies face hardship, they now have an easy scapegoat: the United States. From farmers in South America to manufacturers in Europe, politicians can simply point to Washington's tariffs and say, "This is why our economy is suffering." In doing so, America's image shifts from global leader to global oppressor, turning resentment into a unifying force against it. Meanwhile, countries like China and India have seized the opportunity to present themselves as defenders of free trade. In recent years, their leaders have publicly endorsed the World Trade Organization and championed open markets, ironically, the very principles the U.S. once claimed to lead. This reversal is more than symbolic. It positions BRICS nations as the alternative to Washington's heavy-handed policies, winning them sympathy and new partners across the globe. For the United States, the fallout is severe. Instead of strengthening its economy, tariffs have triggered retaliation, strained alliances, and encouraged the world to build systems that bypass American influence altogether. What was meant to showcase strength has revealed weakness, and the long-term effect is clear. The more tariffs spread, the faster America's role as the center of global trade erodes. Number 5. The decline of U.S. capitalism versus China's growth. For most of the 20th century, the United States proudly showcased capitalism as its greatest achievement. It was credited with building a vast middle class, lifting millions into comfortable lives, and making the American dream a global aspiration. But that story has unraveled. Today, inequality in the U.S. has reached staggering levels. The average CEO now earns thousands of times more than the typical worker, while wages for ordinary Americans have been stagnant for decades. Promises to revive manufacturing are repeated in every election, yet factories never return. Instead, what remains is an economy that enriches a small elite while the middle class slowly disappears. China, on the other hand, tells a very different story. Over the past 25 years, real wages for Chinese workers have quadrupled. Entire cities have risen from poverty to prosperity in a single generation. While the U.S. struggles to achieve annual growth of 2%, China has consistently posted growth rates between 5 and 8%. Its model may be criticized for its contradictions, but the results are undeniable. Hundreds of millions lifted out of poverty and a growing consumer base that rivals anything seen in the West. This contrast is not lost on the world. Developing nations in Asia, Africa, and Latin America see China as proof that rapid economic progress is possible. They look to Beijing, not Washington, for models of infrastructure building, industrial growth, and poverty reduction. Meanwhile, the U.S. clings to a narrative of past glory, with politicians vowing to restore what has already slipped away. The reality is stark. Where American capitalism now symbolizes inequality and decline, China's system, despite its flaws, embodies dynamism and opportunity. In the global contest of economic influence, the momentum has clearly shifted eastward, and the gap continues to widen with every passing year. Number 6, long-term damage and no way back. The ripple effects of America's recent trade wars and sanctions are not short-term disturbances. They are long-lasting scars. Every country that buys from or sells to the United States has already begun rethinking its strategies. Corporations that once relied on U.S. markets are diversifying, governments are pursuing new alliances, and investors are redirecting capital toward regions that feel more stable. Even if Washington were to change course tomorrow, the confidence that once made America the backbone of global trade has been permanently shaken. What makes this so damaging is the element of unpredictability. Business leaders can handle competition and nations can negotiate tough terms, but no one can plan for policies that flip overnight. One administration promises cooperation, the next imposes sweeping tariffs, and allies are treated no differently than rivals. For companies risking billions and for governments planning decades ahead, this volatility makes the U.S. a partner to be avoided, not trusted. Meanwhile, the rest of the world is quietly adapting. Alternative trade systems are being constructed, regional agreements are strengthening, and currencies other than the dollar are slowly gaining ground. Countries are not just reducing exposure to U.S. markets, they are actively preparing to operate without them. The very dominance that once seemed unshakable is now being bypassed, step by step. The truth is stark. The damage is not just economic, it is reputational. America's image as the reliable anchor of global capitalism has been replaced with an image of instability and self-interest. That shift in perception may prove impossible to reverse. The world has learned how dangerous it can be to rely on Washington, and that realization will shape decisions for decades. The U.S. may try to rebuild its influence, but the trust it once enjoyed is gone, and with it, the foundation of its global power. Number 7, possible future scenarios. Looking ahead, the question isn't whether the global order will change, it's how. One possible scenario is a complete fragmentation of trade, where the world splits into rival economic blocs. On one side, the United States and its closest allies, clinging to old systems and the dominance of the dollar. On the other, the BRICS and their expanding network, building parallel institutions that bypass Washington altogether. This would create a divided world economy where countries are forced to choose sides, much like during the Cold War, but this time with economic ties, not just military ones. Another possibility is a more gradual multipolar system. Instead of two rigid camps, trade and power could spread across several centers: the US-China, the European Union, India, and perhaps even regions like Africa and Latin America. In this setup, no single country dictates the rules, and smaller nations gain leverage by balancing between larger powers. For many, this is the most attractive outcome because it limits dependence on any one partner and reduces the risks of being caught in political crossfire. There's also a darker scenario. If economic tensions escalate into currency wars or uncontrolled sanctions, global instability could spiral into crisis. Inflation, market crashes, or even widespread recessions could follow as nations retaliate against each other. In this case, the entire system of global trade built over decades could collapse into chaos, forcing countries to retreat inward and fend for themselves. What all of these scenarios share is one constant. The world is no longer willing to bet everything on America. Whether the future is divided, multipolar, or chaotic, the days of U.S. dominance as the unchallenged center of the global economy are fading fast. The path forward may differ, but the shift itself is already set in motion. The world is entering a new era, one where America is no longer the unquestioned leader of global trade. The rise of China, the growth of BRICS, and the growing mistrust of Washington have reshaped the balance of power in ways that can't be reversed. The question now is not if the U.S. will lose its dominance, it's how fast and what comes after. Do you think America can adapt to this new reality, or is it too late? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more deep dives into global power shifts.